Everyone quotes Neville Goddard. Live in the end. Assume it's done. Feeling is the secret. But almost nobody understands what he was actually describing. Neville wasn't teaching positive thinking. He wasn't teaching visualization. He was teaching quantum mechanics, decades before scientists had the language to explain it. What Neville called assumption is what physicists now call observer-induced wave function collapse. And once you understand what he really meant, manifestation stops being effort and becomes inevitability. Today I'm going to reveal what Neville was actually saying. I'm going to decode his teachings through the lens of quantum physics. I'm going to show you that every technique he taught, every principle he explained, every instruction he gave, maps directly onto quantum mechanical processes. And when you understand the science behind his mysticism, when you recognize the physics behind his metaphysics, his methods become exponentially more powerful. Because you're not just hoping they work, you're understanding why they work. You're recognizing the actual mechanism. You're operating the technology consciously. Neville Goddard lived from 1905 to 1972. He taught manifestation principles that seemed magical, mystical, impossible. He made statements that sounded insane to rational minds. He claimed that consciousness is the only reality, that imagination creates the world, that assuming something is real makes it real, that you can revise the past to change the present, that everyone in your life is you pushed out. These teachings were dismissed as metaphysical fantasy, as wishful thinking, as spiritual delusion. But Neville wasn't delusional. He was describing quantum mechanics. He was explaining observer effect. He was teaching wave function collapse. He was revealing the fundamental nature of reality. He just didn't have the scientific language. He used mystical terms. He spoke in spiritual metaphors. He taught through biblical allegories. But underneath the mysticism was pure physics, pure quantum mechanics, pure consciousness science. And now in 2025, we have the scientific language. We have quantum physics research. We have consciousness studies. We have observer effect experiments. We have wave function collapse mathematics. We have everything we need to decode what Neville was actually teaching, to translate his mystical language into scientific terms, to understand the mechanism behind his methods. And when you make this translation, when you see the quantum physics in his teachings, everything clicks. Everything makes sense. Everything becomes not just believable but inevitable. Because you're not being asked to have faith. You're being shown the science. You're being given the explanation. You're being taught the actual technology of consciousness. Over the past 9 days, you've been building toward this understanding. Day 1 through 7 activated your observer consciousness. You learned that you collapse quantum possibilities through observation. Day 8 taught you frequency alignment. You learned that your electromagnetic field broadcasts to the quantum field. Day 9 revealed subconscious programming. You learned that your deepest beliefs determine your broadcast frequency. And now Day 10 integrates everything through Neville's teachings. Because Neville was teaching the same principles. He just used different language. He called observation assumption. He called frequency alignment feeling. He called wave function collapse living in the end. But he was describing the exact same processes, the exact same mechanisms, the exact same quantum technology that we've been exploring all week. So if you've been struggling with Neville's methods, if you've tried living in the end and it didn't work, if you've practiced ASATs without results, if you've attempted revision unsuccessfully, it's not because his teachings are wrong. It's because you misunderstood what he meant. You interpreted his words through the lens of positive thinking, through the framework of visualization, through the paradigm of hope and faith. But that's not what he was teaching. He was teaching quantum observation, frequency alignment, timeline collapse. And once you understand his teachings correctly, once you apply them as quantum technology rather than spiritual practice, they work. They work consistently. They work powerfully. They work inevitably. Because you're not trying to convince the universe. You're operating the laws of quantum mechanics. You're using consciousness technology. You're collapsing probability waves into desired outcomes. That's what this video teaches you to do. Let's start with Neville's most fundamental teaching. Consciousness is the only reality. This statement sounds mystical, philosophical, maybe even delusional. But it's quantum physics. It's the observer effect stated in different language. Quantum mechanics proves that consciousness determines reality, that observation collapses probability waves, that particles exist in superposition until consciousness observes them, that reality is not fixed until awareness interacts with it. This is what Neville meant by consciousness is the only reality. He wasn't saying physical matter doesn't exist. He was saying physical matter exists in quantum superposition until consciousness collapses it into specific form. He was saying that your awareness, your observation, your consciousness is what determines which possibility becomes your reality. This is not philosophy. This is physics. This is the fundamental nature of quantum reality. When Neville said consciousness is the only reality, he meant that everything you experience is consciousness experiencing itself. That the entire external world is consciousness observing its own possibilities. That you as observer are not separate from what you observe. That subject and object are one unified field of consciousness. And that by changing what you're conscious of, by shifting your awareness, by redirecting your observation, you change what collapses into your experience. This is quantum observer effect explained mystically. This is wave function collapse described spiritually. This is consciousness science taught through metaphysical language. And once you recognize this, once you understand that Neville's consciousness is quantum observation, his entire teaching system becomes scientifically coherent. It becomes mechanistically sound. It becomes practically applicable. Now let's decode his second core teaching. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Most people interpret this as pretending you have what you want, as positive thinking, as fake it till you make it. But that's not what Neville meant. Assumption in Neville's language doesn't mean hope or pretense. It means quantum observation. It means collapsing the wave function through definite awareness. In quantum mechanics, when you assume something is true, when you observe it as real, the quantum field must match that observation. It must collapse into that reality. This is not metaphysics. This is mathematics. This is wave function collapse. When an observer assumes a particle has specific position, the wave function collapses to that position. When consciousness assumes a specific outcome, reality reorganizes to match that assumption. This is proven science. This is measured phenomenon. This is how quantum reality operates. So when Neville says assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, he's not teaching positive thinking. He's teaching quantum observation. He's saying become the observer who witnesses your desire as already real. Collapse the probability wave into that specific outcome. Don't hope for it. Don't wish for it. Don't try to manifest it. Simply observe it as done. Assume it's real. Hold that assumption with the same certainty you hold the assumption that the sun will rise tomorrow. Because assumption in quantum terms is not pretense. It's definite observation. It's consciousness collapsing superposition into specific reality, and the quantum field has no choice but to match your observation. This is law. This is mechanics. This is how consciousness creates reality. And here's where it gets even more precise. Neville says assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not the thought, not the visualization, the feeling. Why? Because feeling is frequency. Feeling is your electromagnetic broadcast. Feeling is what your heart's field radiates into the quantum field. We covered this in day 8. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field 5,000 times stronger than your brain. That field extends 8 feet around you. It carries information about your state, and the quantum field responds to that electromagnetic information. So when Neville says feeling is the secret, he's not talking about emotion. He's talking about frequency. He's talking about electromagnetic coherence. He's saying you must broadcast the frequency of already having your desire, not the frequency of wanting it, not the frequency of hoping for it, the frequency of having it, of being it, of living it. That frequency is what collapses the timeline where it's real. This is why Neville emphasizes feeling from the end, not feeling for the end. When you feel for something, you're broadcasting lack frequency. You're in the state of wanting. You're observing the reality where you don't have it, and the quantum field matches that observation. It gives you more wanting, more lack, more separation from your desire. But when you feel from the end, when you generate the feeling you would have if your desire was already fulfilled, you're broadcasting fulfillment frequency. You're in the state of having. You're observing the reality where it's done, and the quantum field must match that observation. It must collapse into that timeline. This is not spiritual practice. This is electromagnetic physics. This is frequency coherence determining quantum collapse. This is your field broadcasting a signal that reality reorganizes to match. Now let's decode living in the end. This is Neville's most quoted instruction, and it's almost universally misunderstood. People think living in the end means imagining your goal is complete, visualizing success, thinking positive thoughts about the future, but that's not what Neville meant. Living in the end means collapsing quantum superposition. It means choosing which timeline you're observing as real. Remember from week 1, all possible timelines exist simultaneously in quantum superposition. The timeline where you're wealthy exists now. The timeline where you have love exists now. The timeline where you're successful exists now. They're all real. They're all available. They're all broadcasting simultaneously in the quantum field. But you can only experience the timeline you're observing. The timeline you're assuming is real. The timeline you're holding in consciousness. That's the timeline that becomes your reality. So living in the end means living as if the desired timeline is the one you're in. Not hoping you'll get there someday. Not working toward it as future goal, but assuming you're already there. Observing that timeline as your current reality, collapsing the wave function into that specific possibility. This is quantum timeline selection. This is conscious reality choosing. This is observer effect applied to parallel realities. You're not creating something new. You're selecting which already existing timeline you collapse into experience. And you select through assumption, through observation, through definite consciousness that this timeline is real. This is what living in the end actually means. It's not positive thinking. It's quantum collapse through sustained observation of desired timeline. Neville gives specific techniques for how to do this. His primary method is called SATS, state akin to sleep. This is his core practice, and now we can understand why it works. SATS means entering the state between waking and sleeping, that twilight consciousness, that drowsy awareness. Why this state? Because it's theta brainwave frequency, the same frequency we discussed in day 9. The frequency where subconscious programming installs, the frequency where critical mind quiets, the frequency where consciousness becomes highly suggestible, the frequency where imagination can impress directly into subconscious without conscious resistance. Children live in theta from birth to age 7. That's why they absorb programming so easily, and adults can access theta in the state akin to sleep. That's why Neville instructs you to practice there. Here's the SATS technique decoded through quantum mechanics. You lie down before sleep. You enter that drowsy state, theta frequency. Your conscious mind relaxes. Your subconscious becomes receptive. Your critical filters dissolve. Now you imagine a scene that implies your desire is fulfilled, not the desire itself, but something that would only happen after it's done. If you desire wealth, you might imagine checking your bank account and seeing abundance. If you desire love, you might imagine your partner saying, "I love you." If you desire success, you might imagine receiving congratulations. The scene must imply fulfillment. It must be simple. It must be repeatable. And it must generate feeling. You loop this scene over and over in theta state. As you're falling asleep, you're doing multiple things simultaneously. First, you're programming your subconscious with the fulfilled reality. Theta state allows direct installation. Second, you're generating the electromagnetic frequency of fulfillment. Your heart broadcasts that signal. Third, you're assuming the role of observer who witnesses this as real. You're collapsing the wave function. And fourth, you're giving your subconscious clear instruction for overnight processing. During sleep, your brain integrates. It builds neural pathways. It aligns your system with the new reality. This is why SATS works. It's not because you're visualizing. It's because you're accessing theta frequency for subconscious programming, generating coherent electromagnetic broadcast, and collapsing quantum superposition through sustained observation, all while your conscious resistance is minimal. This is precision consciousness technology. This is quantum mechanics applied to manifestation. This is why Neville emphasized SATs above all other techniques, because it combines everything: theta access, frequency alignment, quantum observation, subconscious programming, all in one practice. And when done consistently, it creates inevitable manifestation, not through force, not through effort, but through quantum collapse, through frequency coherence, through observer effect, through consciousness determining reality. Now let's decode revision. This is Neville's most controversial teaching. He claimed you can change the past, that you can revise what already happened, that changing your memory of an event changes its effects in present. This sounds impossible, but it's quantum retrocausality. It's the proven phenomenon where quantum effects can flow backward in time. Studies at University of Vienna and Australian National University demonstrate that quantum entanglement works retroactively. That observation in the present can determine past quantum states, that the future can influence the past at quantum level. This is measured science. This is documented phenomenon. This is how quantum reality actually operates. Time is not linear at quantum level. Causality is not one-directional. The future affects the past. The present rewrites history. And consciousness can access this phenomenon. If you're understanding that Neville was teaching quantum mechanics, if you're seeing the science behind his mysticism, then you need to subscribe immediately, because we're revealing manifestation's deepest secrets in week 2. This is not surface-level content. This is the actual technology of consciousness. This is how reality actually works. So subscribe now. Turn on notifications, because tomorrow we go even deeper into timeline jumping, into navigating parallel realities consciously, and you cannot afford to miss it. When Neville teaches revision, he's teaching quantum timeline editing. Here's how it works. Something happens that you don't like. An argument, a rejection, a failure, a disappointment. That event exists now as memory. That memory generates frequency. That frequency broadcasts a quantum field. That broadcast attracts similar experiences. The past event is literally creating your future through electromagnetic resonance. But here's what Neville understood. Memory is not fixed. Memory is reconstructed every time you access it. Neuroscience proves this. Every time you remember something, your brain rebuilds that memory from stored fragments. And in the rebuilding process, the memory can change. You can alter it. You can revise it. And when you revise the memory, you change its electromagnetic signature. You change the frequency it generates. You change what it attracts. You literally change how that past event affects your present and future. So revision works like this. You recall the unwanted event, but instead of remembering what actually happened, you imagine what you wish had happened. You rewrite the scene in your mind. You see it going the way you wanted. You feel the satisfaction of that better outcome. You loop this revised version until it feels more real than the original memory. You're not denying what happened. You're changing its quantum signature. You're altering its electromagnetic frequency. You're editing the timeline where that event determines your future. And because quantum effects work retroactively, because consciousness can influence past quantum states, your revision actually changes how that past event ripples into your present. This is not fantasy. This is retrocausality. This is quantum timeline editing. This is consciousness technology. Neville said revise every day before sleep. Take anything from your day that was unpleasant. Anything that didn't match your desired reality. And revise it. See it going differently. Feel it ending better. This nightly practice prevents unwanted events from crystallizing into frequency patterns. It stops negative experiences from becoming broadcast signals. It edits your timeline continuously. It keeps your electromagnetic field clean. And over time, this practice literally changes what manifests. Because you're not carrying forward the frequency of unwanted events. You're broadcasting revised frequencies. You're collapsing timelines where things go your way. This is why Neville emphasized revision as daily practice. Not because you're lying to yourself, but because you're editing your quantum broadcast. You're maintaining clean frequency. You're staying in the timeline you actually want. Now let's decode everyone as you pushed out. This is Neville's teaching about other people. He claimed that everyone in your life is a reflection of your consciousness, that other people mirror your assumptions about them, that you create others' behavior through your beliefs about them. This sounds narcissistic. It sounds like blame, but it's quantum entanglement. It's the proven phenomenon where consciousness affects other consciousness, where observation influences the observed, where your electromagnetic field affects everyone in your space. Remember from day 8, your heart's field extends 8 feet. Everyone within that field receives your broadcast. Everyone in your awareness is entangled with your consciousness. And quantum entanglement means that changes in your state create changes in their state. That shifts in your observation create shifts in their behavior. That transformation in your consciousness creates transformation in how they show up. This is not about control. This is not about forcing people. This is about recognizing that relationship is quantum entanglement, that your frequency affects their frequency, that your assumptions about them influence how they express. If you assume someone is difficult, your field broadcasts difficult frequency when near them. They respond to that broadcast. They match that frequency. They fulfill that assumption. But if you revise your assumption, if you observe them as loving or supportive or kind, your field broadcasts that new frequency, and they respond differently. They match the new broadcast. They fulfill the new assumption. This is not manipulation. This is quantum field interaction. This is consciousness entanglement. This is how awareness affects everything it observes. So when Neville says everyone is you pushed out, he means everyone is responding to your consciousness. Everyone is reflecting your assumptions. Everyone is matching your electromagnetic broadcast. Change your consciousness and they change. Shift your assumptions and they shift. Revise your beliefs about them and their behavior revises. This is why Neville taught to never discuss your problems with others. Never complain about people. Never reinforce negative assumptions, because every time you speak negatively about someone, you strengthen that assumption. You broadcast that frequency. You collapse the timeline where they behave that way. But when you revise your thoughts about them, when you assume they're different, when you hold only positive awareness of them, you collapse timelines where they show up better, where they treat you differently, where relationship transforms. Now let's address why most people fail with Neville's methods. Despite studying his work, despite practicing his techniques, despite understanding his principles intellectually, they don't get results. And there are specific reasons why. First reason is they hope instead of assume. There's a massive difference between hoping something is true and assuming something is true. Hope is weak observation. Hope is uncertain consciousness. Hope contains doubt. Hope broadcasts mixed frequency. When you hope for wealth, You're simultaneously aware you don't have it. When you hope for love, you're acknowledging its absence. When you hope for success, you're observing current lack. Hope creates split observation. Split observation creates chaotic frequency. Chaotic frequency blocks manifestation. But assumption is definite observation. Assumption is certain consciousness. Assumption contains no doubt. Assumption broadcasts pure frequency. When you assume you're wealthy, you observe that as fact. When you assume you're loved, you hold that as reality. When you assume success, you witness it as done. This creates coherent observation. Coherent observation creates clear frequency. Clear frequency collapses desired timeline. Second reason people fail is they feel for the end instead of from the end. This distinction is everything. When you feel for something, you're in wanting state. You're aware of not having it. You're broadcasting lack frequency. You're observing the reality where it's absent. And the quantum field matches that observation. It gives you more wanting, more lack, more absence. But when you feel from the end, you're in having state. You're experiencing it as real. You're broadcasting fulfillment frequency. You're observing the reality where it exists. And the quantum field must match that observation. It must give you the experience of having, of fulfillment, of presence. This is why Neville emphasized feeling from, not for. Because the frequency difference is total. Because the observation difference determines outcome. Because from collapses the desired timeline while for collapses continued wanting. Third reason people fail is they check 3D reality for proof. They do sats at night. They assume during practice, but then they wake up and check their bank account. Check their phone for messages. Check their circumstances for evidence. And when they don't see immediate change, they collapse back into old observation. They return to lack consciousness. They broadcast doubt frequency. They recollapse the old timeline. This is the fatal mistake. Neville warned constantly against checking the 3D. Against demanding immediate physical proof. Against letting current circumstances determine your assumption. Because the 3D is always showing you the result of your past observation, your past frequency, your past consciousness. It's showing you what you collapsed before, not what you're collapsing now. New observation takes time to manifest physically. New frequency needs time to reorganize matter. New consciousness requires persistence to fully collapse new timeline. So checking the 3D too soon is like planting a seed and digging it up daily to see if it sprouted. You interrupt the process. You block the manifestation. You recollapse old reality through renewed observation of lack. Neville said ignore the 3D completely. Persist in your assumption regardless of physical evidence. Hold your observation constant despite what you see. Maintain your frequency regardless of circumstances. Because manifestation is not instant. Quantum collapse takes time to precipitate into matter. Consciousness needs persistence to override previous programming. The 3D will change. Reality will shift. Matter will reorganize. But only if you maintain your new observation long enough. Only if you persist in assumption consistently. Only if you refuse to let current circumstances collapse you back into old consciousness. Fourth reason people fail is they try to force the bridge. Neville taught that after you assume, after you live in the end, after you hold the observation, a bridge of incidents will unfold. A series of events, a path of synchronicities, a sequence of opportunities that naturally leads you to the fulfilled desire. You don't create the bridge. You don't plan the path. You don't force the how. You simply assume the end and let the bridge appear. But most people can't tolerate this. They want to control. They want to know how. They want to plan the path. So they start forcing action. They start manipulating circumstances. They start trying to make it happen through effort. And this forcing blocks the natural bridge. This controlling interrupts the quantum unfolding. This effort collapses you out of the end state and into the working toward state. Into the not there yet state. Into the future goal state. And those states broadcast different frequency. They observe different timeline. They collapse different reality. Neville said your job is only to assume, only to observe the end, only to feel from fulfillment. The universe's job is to build the bridge, to arrange the circumstances, to orchestrate the events. Trust this division of labor. You handle consciousness. Reality handles manifestation. You maintain the observation. The quantum field reorganizes the matter. You broadcast the frequency. The electromagnetic field attracts the circumstances. Do not try to do reality's job. Do not attempt to force the how. Simply hold your assumption. Persist in your observation. Maintain your frequency. And watch the bridge appear. Watch the path unfold. Watch the manifestation arrive. Through ways you couldn't have planned. Through doors you didn't know existed. Through bridges you couldn't have built. This is allowing versus forcing. This is trust versus control. This is quantum flow versus human effort. Fifth reason people fail is they don't maintain assumption. They practice sats for a week. They live in the end for a few days. They assume for a short period, and then they give up. They lose faith. They return to doubt. They collapse back into old consciousness. But Neville emphasized persistence. He said, persist in your assumption. Persist regardless of evidence. Persist despite circumstances. Persist until it hardens into fact. Because manifestation requires sustained observation. It requires consistent frequency. It requires maintained consciousness over time. You cannot observe wealth for 1 day and poverty for 6 days and expect wealth to manifest. You cannot assume love for 1 week and loneliness for 3 weeks and expect relationship to appear. You cannot feel success occasionally and failure constantly and expect achievement to materialize. The timeline that manifests is the timeline you observe most consistently. The reality that appears is the reality you assume most persistently. The outcome that collapses is the outcome you hold most constantly. So Neville's real secret is not a technique, it's persistence. It's maintaining assumption regardless of physical evidence. It's holding observation despite contrary circumstances. It's broadcasting frequency consistently over time. Most people have the techniques. Most people understand the principles. But most people lack persistence. They give up too soon. They doubt too easily. They collapse back into old observation too quickly. But if you persist, if you maintain assumption, if you hold observation consistently, if you broadcast frequency constantly, if you live in the end regardless of current 3D, then manifestation is inevitable. Not because you're forcing it, not because you're working hard, but because you're operating quantum law. You're applying observer effect. You're collapsing wave function through sustained consciousness. And reality has no choice but to match. Right now, pause and go to the comments. Write exactly this. I assume my desires are already mine. Write those words, because when you do, you're declaring your new observation. You're committing to assumption. You're collapsing the wave function through conscious declaration. So do it now. Scroll down. Leave that comment. I assume my desires are already mine. Then come back and we'll learn the complete assumption protocol. Now let me give you the complete assumption protocol. This is Neville's method decoded through quantum mechanics and applied as practical technology. This is how you actually collapse desired timelines. This is how you manifest inevitably. This 7-step protocol combines everything we've learned. Observer effect, frequency alignment, subconscious programming, theta state access, quantum collapse, timeline selection, all integrated into one coherent practice. If you follow this protocol consistently, manifestation becomes mechanical, not magical, not hopeful, but inevitable. Because you're operating the laws that govern reality, you're using consciousness technology. You're collapsing probability waves into specific outcomes. Step 1 is identify desired end state. You must get crystal clear on what you want, not the process, not the journey, not the how, just the end. the fulfilled desire, the accomplished goal, the realized dream. What does it look like when it's done? What does it feel like when you have it? What's different in your life when it's real? Be specific, be detailed, be clear, write it down. This clarity is essential because vague observation collapses vague reality. Unclear assumption creates unclear manifestation, but specific consciousness collapses specific outcome. You're defining which quantum possibility you're observing, which timeline you're selecting, which reality you're collapsing into experience. So take time with this step. Get absolutely clear. Define the exact end state you're assuming as real. Step 2 is enter theta state. This is Neville's SATS technique, state akin to sleep. You must access this frequency for the protocol to work optimally. The best time is right before sleep at night, or right after waking in the morning, in those twilight moments. When you're drowsy, when your conscious mind is quiet, when your critical filters are down, lie down comfortably. Close your eyes. Begin relaxing your body systematically. Start with your feet. Release all tension. Move to your legs. Let them become heavy. Progress through your entire body, releasing, relaxing, letting go. Your breathing slows naturally. Your thoughts become dreamy. You're entering that drowsy state, that theta frequency. You're not trying to stay awake. You're not trying to fall asleep. You're in the space between. This is the optimal state for subconscious programming, for quantum observation, for timeline collapse. Step 3 is assume it's already done. This is where you become the observer who witnesses your desire as fulfilled, not as future possibility, not as something you're working toward, but as present reality, as accomplished fact, as done. You're not hoping it will happen. You're not wishing it was real. You're assuming it is real, right now, in this moment. This is definite observation. This is certain consciousness. This is quantum collapse through unwavering awareness. In theta state, with your body relaxed, with your mind quiet, you declare internally, "It is done, my desire is fulfilled. I have what I wanted, not I will have, not I hope to have, not I'm trying to have, I have." Present tense, definite, certain, real. Feel the truth of this declaration, not as affirmation you're trying to believe, but as fact you're observing, as reality you're witnessing, as truth you're experiencing. Now create a simple scene that implies this fulfillment. Not the desire itself, but evidence of it. Something that would only exist if your desire was already real. If you desire wealth, imagine checking your bank account and feeling satisfied with the abundance. If you desire love, imagine your partner holding your hand and feeling the warmth. If you desire success, imagine someone congratulating you and feeling the pride. The scene must be simple, must be short, must be repeatable, must generate feeling, and must imply fulfillment. Don't imagine the wedding if you desire relationship. Imagine the morning after, being together, comfortable, real. Don't imagine receiving the money if you desire wealth. Imagine already having it, using it, enjoying it. Don't imagine the promotion if you desire career success. Imagine already being in that position, doing that work, living that reality. This distinction is crucial. You're not imagining the transition. You're not visualizing the manifestation process. You're observing the end result. You're living in the already done reality. You're collapsing the timeline where it's complete. Loop this scene over and over in theta state as you're drifting toward sleep. See it, hear it, feel it. Engage all your senses. Make it vivid. Make it real. Make it present. You're not watching yourself in the scene. You're in the scene. First person, experiencing it directly. This is not visualization where you're an outside observer. This is assumption where you are the experiencer. You're inhabiting the fulfilled reality. You're being the version of you who has this. You're observing from inside the accomplished state. Loop this scene for at least 10 minutes, or until you fall asleep. Let it be the last thing in your consciousness. Give your subconscious this clear instruction for overnight processing. Step 4 is feel from the end, not for the end. As you loop your scene, as you assume fulfillment, as you observe the done state, you must generate the frequency of already having it, not the frequency of wanting it. Not the excitement of getting it, but the calm satisfaction of having it, the peaceful contentment of it being done, the grateful acknowledgement of it being real. This is the frequency that collapses the timeline. This is the electromagnetic signature that reorganizes reality. This is the broadcast that the quantum field matches. When you feel for something, you're in lack. You're aware it's not here yet. You're broadcasting want frequency, and the field gives you more wanting. But when you feel from having it, you're in fulfillment. You're experiencing it as real. You're broadcasting completion frequency, and the field must give you completion. So as you practice your scene, notice the feeling tone. Are you excited about getting it? That's for energy. Wanting energy. Future energy. Shift to the feeling of already having it. The satisfaction, the contentment, the normalcy of it being yours. That's from energy. Having energy, present energy. This feeling shift is what makes sats work. This frequency alignment is what collapses the quantum possibility. Your electromagnetic field broadcasts this frequency all night. Your subconscious integrates this state during sleep. Your consciousness maintains this observation even after you fall asleep. And over time, over consistent practice, this sustained frequency and unwavering observation collapse the desired timeline into physical manifestation, not through magic, not through universe favors, but through quantum mechanics, through observer effect, through electromagnetic field resonance, through consciousness determining reality. Some nights you'll feel it strongly. The scene will feel real. The frequency will be clear. The assumption will be solid. Other nights you'll struggle. The scene will feel forced. The frequency will be weak. The assumption will be shaky. This is normal. Don't judge it. Don't give up. Just continue the practice. Consistency matters more than perfection. Persistence matters more than powerful individual sessions. You're building neural pathways through repetition. You're programming your subconscious through sustained input. You're training your electromagnetic field through consistent broadcast. Results come from cumulative practice, from showing up nightly, from maintaining assumption over time, not from one perfect sat session. Step 5 is persist in assumption. This is where most people fail with Neville's method. They do sats for a few nights. They assume for a short period, and then they wake up and check the 3D. They look at their bank account and see the same numbers. They check their phone and see no messages. They observe their circumstances and see no change. And immediately they collapse back into old observation. They return to lack consciousness. They broadcast out frequency. They recollapse the timeline where they don't have what they want. And then they wonder why sats didn't work. They question why assumption failed. They doubt whether Neville's methods are real. But the methods didn't fail. They failed to persist. Neville said persist in your assumption regardless of what your senses tell you. Regardless of what the 3D shows. Regardless of what appears to be true. Because the 3D is always showing you yesterday's observation, last week's frequency, last month's consciousness. Physical reality is the delayed reflection of your past state, not your current state. When you begin new assumption, when you start living in the end, when you shift your observation, the quantum field responds immediately. The timeline begins collapsing immediately. But physical matter takes time to reorganize. The 3D takes time to reflect new consciousness. There's always a lag, always a gap, always a delay between new observation and physical manifestation. So if you check the 3D too soon, if you let current circumstances determine your consciousness, if you collapse back into old observation based on physical evidence, you're interrupting the manifestation process. You're stopping the quantum collapse. You're returning to the old timeline. It's like planting a seed and digging it up every day to check if it's sprouted. The seed needs time in darkness, time underground, time to root before it breaks surface. Your manifestation needs the same, time in the invisible, time in quantum, time to organize before it becomes physical. And if you keep digging it up through doubt, through checking, through letting 3D evidence override your assumption, you prevent it from ever breaking through into manifestation. Neville told stories of people who persisted for months, for years, without physical evidence, without 3D confirmation, without any sign their assumption was working. But they maintained their observation. They held their consciousness. They persisted in their assumption, and eventually, inevitably, their 3D reality transformed. It reorganized completely. It matched their sustained consciousness. Because quantum mechanics is law, observer effect is constant. Consciousness determines reality, but it requires persistence. It requires unwavering observation. It requires maintained assumption regardless of contrary evidence. This is the hardest part. This is where faith becomes mechanics. This is where spiritual practice becomes quantum technology. So your job after SATs, after assuming, after living in the end is to persist. Throughout your day, maintain your assumption. When you wake up in the morning, don't immediately check your circumstances. Don't let the 3D collapse you back into lack. Instead, remember your SAT test scene. Feel the frequency of fulfillment. Observe from the end state. Start your day as the version who has what you desire, not as the version working toward it, not as the version hoping for it, but as the version living it. When doubt arises during the day, and it will arise, catch it, recognize it, and redirect. Return to assumption. Return to the end. Return to the fulfilled state. Every time doubt tries to collapse you back, consciously choose your desired observation again. When people ask about your situation, don't discuss lack. Don't reinforce old reality through conversation. Don't give voice to what you don't want. Either speak as if your assumption is already real, or say nothing. Silence is better than contradicting your assumption, because every time you speak lack, you observe lack. Every time you complain about current circumstances, you collapse that timeline. Every time you discuss problems, you strengthen that frequency. So guard your speech. Protect your assumption. Maintain your observation through everything you say. Speak only what matches your desired end, or remain silent. And here's a key practice that Neville emphasized. Throughout your day, do small acts that imply your assumption is real. If you're assuming wealth, spend a moment browsing something you would buy when wealthy, not to create desire, but to inhabit the consciousness of someone who can afford it. If you're assuming love, set the table for two. Buy groceries for two. Make small choices as if your partner exists. If you're assuming success, make decisions from that position. Handle situations as that version would. These small acts keep you in the assumption. They maintain the observation. They sustain the frequency. They prevent collapse back into old consciousness. They're not forcing. They're not pretending. They're simply acting from the end rather than for the end. Acting as the version who has it rather than as the version trying to get it. Additionally, practice revision daily. This is step 6 of the protocol. Every evening before your SATs practice, review your day. Identify anything that contradicted your assumption. Any moment where you slipped into lack consciousness. Any interaction that reinforced old reality. Any circumstance that felt like evidence against your desire. And revise it. Reimagine it. See it going differently. See yourself maintaining assumption. See the circumstance reflecting your desired reality. This revision serves multiple purposes. It prevents unwanted events from crystallizing into frequency patterns. It keeps your electromagnetic field clean. It maintains coherent observation. It edits your timeline continuously. And it trains your consciousness to stay in assumption even when challenged. For example, if you're assuming wealth and you received a bill that triggered scarcity consciousness, Revise it. Imagine receiving that bill and feeling completely calm, completely abundant, completely unconcerned. Imagine paying it easily, feeling grateful you have more than enough. This revision changes the electromagnetic signature of that event. It prevents it from broadcasting lack frequency. It transforms it into evidence of your assumption rather than against it. Do this with every contradictory event, every doubt-inducing circumstance, every 3D moment that challenged your observation. Revise it all. Make your entire day consistent with your assumption, through revision if necessary, through reimagination of events, through conscious editing of your timeline. Step 7 is let the bridge of incidents unfold. After you assume, after you persist, after you maintain observation, a bridge will appear. A path will open. A sequence of events will unfold. That leads you to your fulfilled desire. You don't create this bridge. You don't plan this path. You don't force these events. They emerge naturally from your sustained consciousness, from your persistent frequency, from your maintained observation. The quantum field reorganizes, reality restructures, circumstances align, opportunities appear, people show up, resources materialize, synchronicities multiply, all creating a natural bridge from your current 3D to your assumed end state. Your job is not to build this bridge. Your job is to recognize it when it appears and walk across it. The bridge might look nothing like what you expected. The path might be completely different from what you planned. The opportunities might come from unexpected directions. Don't reject the bridge because it doesn't match your mental picture. Don't ignore the path because it's not what you thought it would be. Don't dismiss opportunities because they seem too small or too strange. The quantum field is more intelligent than your conscious mind. The universe knows paths you can't see. Reality can arrange circumstances you can't imagine. Trust the bridge that appears. Walk the path that opens. Take the opportunities that arrive. Even if they don't make logical sense. Even if they don't seem related to your desire. Even if they feel random or coincidental. Often the bridge involves intermediate steps, seemingly unrelated events, apparent detours. You assume wealth and an old friend contacts you. You assume love and you get invited to a random event. You assume success and you're offered a strange opportunity. These don't seem like your manifestation. They don't appear to be leading to your desire, but they're the bridge. They're the path. They're the quantum field orchestrating your manifestation. So say yes to the synchronicities. Follow the breadcrumbs. Take the steps that present themselves. Trust that your sustained assumption is working, that your persistent observation is collapsing the timeline, that your maintained frequency is organizing reality, and let the bridge unfold naturally, without forcing, without controlling, without needing to understand the entire path before you walk it. This is where surrender meets assumption. You're not surrendering your desire. You're not giving up your observation. You're not abandoning your assumption, but you are surrendering control of how it manifests. You're releasing attachment to specific paths. You're trusting quantum intelligence over human logic. You assume the end with absolute certainty. You persist in that assumption with unwavering commitment, and simultaneously you allow the means to appear naturally. You let reality arrange the circumstances. You trust the field to build the bridge. This is the balance. Definite about the end, flexible about the means, certain in your observation, open to the path, persistent in assumption, allowing in manifestation. Neville emphasized this constantly. Assume the end. Persist in the assumption. Ignore the 3D evidence and let the bridge appear. Don't try to figure out how. Don't attempt to force the path. Don't manipulate the circumstances. Simply hold the consciousness. Maintain the frequency. Sustain the observation and watch reality reorganize. Watch the bridge build itself. Watch manifestation unfold naturally, through ways you couldn't have planned, through doors you didn't know existed, through means you couldn't have imagined. This is quantum collapse in action. This is consciousness creating reality. This is observer effect manifesting in physical form. And it happens not through effort, not through force, not through control, but through sustained assumption. Through persistent observation, through maintained consciousness that your desire is already done. Tomorrow in day 11, we're going deep into timeline jumping protocol. We're going to explore how to consciously navigate between parallel realities, how to identify which timeline you're currently in, how to detect when you've shifted, how to deliberately move between quantum possibilities. This is advanced reality navigation. This builds on everything we've learned. The observer effect, frequency alignment, subconscious programming, and now assumption. Tomorrow we put it all together into conscious timeline jumping. You cannot miss day 11. It's one of the most practical protocols in the entire series. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure notifications are on, because tomorrow we navigate parallel realities consciously. Let's integrate everything we covered today. You learned that Neville Goddard was teaching quantum mechanics decades before scientists had the language, that his mystical terms were describing physical processes. That consciousness is the only reality means observer effect determines outcomes. That assumption means definite observation that collapses wave function. That living in the end means selecting which parallel timeline you observe as real. That feeling is the secret means electromagnetic frequency alignment with desired state. That SATS is theta brain state access for subconscious programming. That revision is quantum timeline editing through retrocausality. That everyone is you pushed out means quantum entanglement and consciousness affecting consciousness. Every single teaching Neville gave maps directly onto quantum physics. Every principle he explained is consciousness science. Every technique he taught is quantum technology. You discovered why most people fail with Neville's methods despite studying his work. They hope instead of assume, creating weak observation and mixed frequency. They feel for the end instead of from the end, broadcasting wanting rather than having. They check the 3D for proof too soon, collapsing back into old timeline before new one manifests. They try to force the bridge instead of allowing it to unfold, controlling rather than trusting. They don't maintain assumption long enough, giving up before quantum collapse completes in physical form. These mistakes prevent manifestation, not because Neville's methods don't work, but because the methods aren't being applied correctly, aren't being understood deeply, aren't being practiced with quantum mechanics awareness, and you receive the complete assumption protocol. 7 steps for collapsing desired timelines through Neville's method applied as quantum technology. Identify your desired end state with absolute clarity. Enter theta state through SATS technique for optimal programming access. Assume it's already done with definite observation and scene that implies fulfillment. Feel from the end, not for the end, generating frequency of having, not wanting. Persist in assumption regardless of 3D evidence or contrary circumstances. Practice daily revision to keep timeline edited and frequency clean. Let the bridge of incidents unfold without forcing or controlling the path. This protocol combines everything: observer effect, frequency alignment, subconscious access, quantum collapse, timeline selection, all integrated into one practice. Remember that manifestation through assumption is not instant. Physical reality takes time to reorganize. Matter takes time to match consciousness. The 3D takes time to reflect new observation. There's always a lag between quantum collapse and physical manifestation, between frequency shift and circumstantial change, between new assumption and visible evidence. This lag is where persistence is tested, where faith becomes mechanics, where spiritual practice becomes quantum technology. You must maintain your assumption during the invisible time, during the gap, during the period where quantum has shifted but 3D hasn't yet reflected it. This is the hardest part. This is where most people fail. But this is also where manifestation is won or lost. Neville persisted for years on some of his assumptions. Years without physical evidence. Years without 3D confirmation. Years of maintaining observation despite contrary circumstances. But he understood quantum law. He knew observer effect is constant. He trusted that sustained consciousness must eventually manifest. And it always did. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but inevitably, because consciousness determines reality, because observation collapses probability, because assumption selects timeline. This is not belief. This is physics. This is mechanics. This is law. And law operates consistently when applied correctly and persistently. You are not hoping for manifestation anymore. You're not wishing for outcomes. You're not trying to convince the universe. You're operating quantum mechanics. You're using consciousness technology. You're collapsing probability waves through definite observation. You're selecting timelines through sustained assumption. You're reorganizing reality through persistent frequency. This is science. This is how consciousness creates reality. This is what Neville was actually teaching. And now you understand it. Now you have the protocol. Now you can apply it correctly. Over the next 30 days minimum, practice the assumption protocol nightly. Every single night before sleep, do sats. Enter theta state. Create your scene that implies fulfillment. Loop it with feeling. Fall asleep in the assumption. Every single day, maintain your observation. Persist regardless of circumstances. Revise contradictory events. Act from the end in small ways. Guard your speech. Protect your assumption. And let the bridge unfold naturally. This consistency creates inevitable manifestation. This persistence collapses desired timeline. This sustained observation reorganizes reality, not through magic, not through spiritual favors, but through quantum law, through observer effect, through consciousness determining outcomes. Tomorrow we take this even further. We explore conscious timeline jumping, how to navigate between parallel realities deliberately, how to recognize when you've shifted timelines, how to detect which reality you're currently in, how to move between quantum possibilities at will. Day 11 is advanced navigation. It's the culmination of everything we've built. The observer activation from week 1, the frequency mastery from day 8, the subconscious reprogramming from day 9, the assumption technique from today, all integrated into conscious timeline navigation. You're not just manifesting anymore. You're becoming a quantum navigator, a reality architect, a conscious timeline selector. And day 11 shows you exactly how. So I'll see you tomorrow. In day 11, in timeline jumping protocol, in parallel reality navigation, week 2 is transforming you into a master of quantum mechanics, into a conscious creator, into someone who doesn't just understand manifestation but operates it as technology. Stay committed, stay consistent, stay in your assumption, because you're not hoping for your desires anymore. You're observing them as already done. You're collapsing the timelines where they're real. You're living in the end, and reality has no choice but to match. This is Conscious Observer. Assume your reality, collapse your timeline,